4 buckets. And so they went and got 4 more buckets and came back and poured that around the altar. I said, well, let's make it just a little bit harder. Let's get 4 more. So they went and got 4 more and brought it again and poured it all out, and it overflowed and went around everywhere, and people started getting all wet. My feet were wet. My clothes were wet. And I said, okay. I said, Lord God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Israel, come now to this place. Send down your fire on this altar so that these people who have gathered here today will know that you are Yahweh. You are the Lord God. And after I said that, I made sure to run out of the way. Because indeed, there was a lightning strike from heaven, and it burned up the wood, it burned up the beast, it burned up the stone themselves, and dried up every drop of water. Just like that. And I said, woohoo! How about that now? I was one excited man. And I looked around at all the people who had gathered there. Great, huge crowd of people. And I said, let's get them. And sure enough, they jumped up and started running against that other team. It was just like that App State game at Michigan. They ran down and put their hands around, not the goalpost and tore them down. They put their hands around the necks of those prophets of Baal and Asherah and took them down into the river and destroyed them all. Wow. I sure was proud then. That's right. My God did that. Yahweh. And I'm his prophet. Oh, I feeling pretty good. And I told King Ahab, the drought's over now. You better decide. And sure enough, after that, he repented. And he started running down the mountain back to the valley of Jezreel. And I just showed him. I started running too. I pulled up my cloak and started running out in front of him. Got there before he did. I showed him who was the champion. But not long after that, I got news. You ever been happy about something? Just thrilled. God has done something powerful in your life. But just a bit of bad news. Even though God can do all things, God can be there for all things. I got this news that when Jezebel heard about what had taken place, and she said, it's over for you, Elihu. We're going to do to you what you did to those prophets. And I hate to tell you this, but I ran and hid. I first ran down to Beersheba, and there sat under a juniper tree, but was sustained by an angel for a while. But the Lord told me to get up from there, that he wanted me to go somewhere else. And so I went south to Mount Horeb. Some places in the Bible it's called Mount Sinai. It's where Moses received the 10 Commandments from Yahweh. And so I went there and found a cave and hunkered down in that cave for a while. And the Lord said, Yahoo, come to the front of the cave. I said, okay. And I went out and stuck my head out of the cave. And he said he was going to pass by. And so I began to look for Yahweh to pass by. And suddenly there was this great wind that started destroying the mountains around the mountainside. Rocks were falling down. And I trembled in fear. Is that the Lord? And he said, the Lord wasn't in that wind. And there was a great earthquake. Everything started to shake and rocks were falling again, and I thought I was just going to lose my life. But the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. Then there was a great fire all across the land, like nothing I'd ever seen before. But the Lord was not in the fire. And suddenly, there was great stillness in the land. And then a small voice spoke to me. It was the voice of Yahweh. And Yahweh asked me, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, Lord, there was this mean queen, and she said she was going to have me killed. And, it was after I did that great thing for you, but she sent out a hit team after me, and I just felt like I needed to hide out for a while. I hope you understand." And he said, "Well, I'm going to send you somewhere else. I want you to go and anoint the king for Israel and the king for Judah, and I want you to go find your replacement, Elisha, and anoint him and begin training him." And so that's what I did. I went and anointed those kings and found Elisha, and he began following me everywhere I went. I want to know everything that I've done. He was a good man, but he got to be a little overbearing at times. Came time for me to move along, and I told him not to follow me, that this was something between me and Yahweh, and he just wouldn't give up. And so we made our way across the countryside down to the Jordan River. There I took off my mantle and touched the river itself, and it turned dry, and we walked across the river together. He still wouldn't leave me alone, and then suddenly, just like that, I was gone. I guess Elisha saw a whirlwind, a fire, or whatever. But I was gone. Just as I had come into the story in the Old Testament, out of nowhere, I departed out of nowhere. Now, it's mentioned later in another prophet, the last prophet in the Old Testament, as one who was going to reappear one day when the Messiah comes. Kind of a prelude to the Messiah. And indeed, in the New Testament, in your Gospels, you sometimes hear how John the Baptist was compared to me. And maybe if you remember when Jesus went on the mountaintop, who was there? Moses and Elijah. Moses being the representative of the law, and Elijah being the great prophet. Law and the prophet. Well, even today, Jews, this falls into your customs as well. When you have communion, the Jews, when they have their meal, the Vesper meal, on Passover, will always leave an extra chair. When you have communion, who sits in that chair? No one. You know why? It's left for Elijah. Just like in the Seder meal. Because Elijah one day will return. And you need to be ready, because the Lord shall return shortly thereafter. You're getting an early viewing of Elijah. I am coming back before the Lord comes. But the reason that I'm here today is because when I was confronted by the Lord before He told me to go back and anoint those kings and to find me a replacement, I had said, Lord, I did this and I did that. And wasn't I such a great leader of the people when you had that battle and we destroyed all those priests, and how important that I was? You showed me. You said, I said, there's no more prophets left. No one. Only me. A little down the scriptures it says, Elijah, there were still 7,000 more that had not bowed down to Baal. Sometimes we think we can do it all. Well, we're that wonderful and that important. But God shows us who's really important. The widow who sustains us when we are in need. God doesn't always work. In fact, He rarely works in great earthquakes, in great winds, in great fires. The most probable place you'll hear God is how I finally heard God. In a small